just tell me a little bit about what you're up to, and particularly recently in your world.
Well, in the work world, I'd say the effort is to make real the holding company concept that we started a few years ago, which is very new within the AAA world, and a lot of skeptics around AAA, which has been around for 100 years, about a concept where we bring clubs together to collaborate without creating operating authority at the holding company level.
Right.
So it's a very different concept, and we've done pretty well with it, and it's pretty exciting. So I'm spending my time working with the clubs on what we can do together to create value.
And why? What was the impetus for wanting to bring clubs together? Because these clubs are operating reasonably successfully on their own in their own regional areas. So, what was your thinking that caused you to want to bring them together?
Well, unlike many of the leaders within AAA of various clubs, I'm one of the few that came from the outside. And so I had a bit of a unique perspective on the outside world. AAA tends to be pretty insular, and the view of AAA is within itself. And it seemed to me that we had a lot of capabilities that we weren't leveraging. Clubs did what they did for themselves, but they didn't do it for each other. And we had an amazing organization of 70 clubs with 50 million members, and yet we didn't, capture the full value of all of those clubs and all those members. So it got me to thinking of how do you put that together in a way where the clubs are going to still think that they're their own club, but at the same time they're part of something bigger where they can add value, leverage resources, do things together that they weren't doing.
Well, I'm curious, how did it get to be that way in the first place, of separate clubs? I mean, it started with one club, I would imagine. Maybe I'm wrong, but how did it emerge to these separate areas?
Actually, you would be wrong.
I would be. That wouldn't be the first time.
The origin of AAA was, I would say, very local motorist groups. So the first 30 people who owned a car in San Francisco, and there was a time when there were only 30 cars, recognized, there are no roads, there are no rules. What happens if we can't get our cars going? What happens if we break down? So they decided to create a club, and the club's purpose was to help them enjoy their cars.
Right.
And these sprouted up all over the United States.
Under the same name, or?
Eventually under the umbrella of a national brand, but as all individual organizations.
Got it.
So in many states, each county had its own club. In some states, cities had their own clubs. And there were hundreds and hundreds of clubs. And over time, as you would expect, clubs have begun to merge with each other. We're down to 50, but the 50 tend to be pretty independent of each other.
Right.
We support each other in that we're the same brand, and if somebody's member broke down in our territory, we would certainly take care of them. But we're not calling each other up to say, how can we do things together?
Sure.
We're not looking to leverage our capabilities.
And there's been no impetus for that.
And there's been no impetus, because we've got our worlds and we're working on doing our things, and generally it's been going okay. But I think what happened is the nature of our business was that we didn't have any single competitors.
Right.
We had a competitor in our road service business. We had a competitor in our mapping business. We had a competitor in our travel business, but we didn't have a competitor.
Right. No other AAA club saying, hey, let's do a better AAA club than you all.
Let's do better than them and take their business away.
Right.
And what's happened in the recent years, we're starting to see some of what we do come together. Technology's driven a lot of that. Maps used to be paper maps, and now virtually every device you own, you can get some kind of map out of it. And the maps are embedded in other parts of what we do. They're becoming a part of insurance in terms of knowing where you are and how much you're driving. They're becoming a part of our rescue business in terms of the OnStar model of, I can remotely unlock your car doors, or I know where you are because of GPS. So what we're seeing is all of these businesses coming together, And we might be okay in each of them separately, but we've got to get better at doing them together. And we're not going to do that 50 times as 50 different clubs. We have to work differently together.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. It also, I can understand why it wouldn't have happened until recently. There's not enough competition or not enough pushing
Right.
on it. And so you start to feel like, well, we're doing what we're doing and we do it well and we're happy with doing it. Why change anything?
Right.
And why come together? I can see it clearly. I can also imagine there might have been some missed opportunities along the way. I'm just thinking GPS, for example. I don't know who started GPS, but I'm not imagining it was AAA. And GPS is an enormous technology that serves motorists, but has come from somewhere else other than AAA.
Right,
There may be others.
That is a huge challenge for us. I think if you ask the general public, name the 10 most innovative companies in America, AAA would not be on anybody's list.
Yeah,
and that's too bad.
Yeah.
Because 80 years ago, we were incredibly innovative. We were the first one to do many things because cars were new and it was all evolving, and we were the evolvers, right?
Right.
In the last 10 years, innovation has been done to us, and it's time for us to turn it around. So one of the things that I'm spending a lot of time on, which is really exciting, is to build an innovation capability.
Yeah.
And make that sustainable and part of the culture and the fabric of the organization.
Yeah.
Which is a real challenge on a 100-plus-year-old organization that's been kind of doing it the same way for a long time.
Yeah. So it was birthed by innovation, but it wasn't an innovation machine.
Correct.
Which is a lot of companies, come into the world from an innovation of sorts to meet some kind of need, and then they deliver on that need. But to create an engine that can reproduce more and more innovation, that's a magnitude different problem.
And I think it's pretty common. When you get to a certain scale, then most of your mindset is on operations, process, just kind of do the business.
Right.
And less on what's new.
Right.
You're just trying to keep it all working and be efficient and satisfy all your customers, as opposed to be thinking about where might those customers have other choices or what else is happening around you.
Yeah.
And it's a threat for us.
I can imagine, and I can also imagine that without much competition, there's not much pushing.
Right.
I'm thinking of companies that kind of were there early arrivers and then disappeared from the planet. Pan Am is a great example of one. It was among the two or three dominant players. You thought of airlines, you thought of Pan Am. But what Pan Am did, it was get kind of fat and happy.
Right.
And then when competition internationally came in, it may have been productive within a certain climate. It just couldn't withstand. It never stayed innovative enough or incrementally innovative enough.
It's an obvious issue. We have a business where we are a dominant provider for services for people 50 and older.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at that point, safety, security, peace of mind are important.
Mm-hmm.
They might have children or even themselves. They want to make sure they're taken care of. That's who we are, peace of mind.
Mm-hmm.
When you're 24 years old, you're kind of
You're invulnerable.
You're invulnerable. There's nothing that's going to happen. Why would I need AAA?
Right.
I got my cell phone. I got friends. Whatever. It's when people begin having families and they start thinking about security differently, then they kind of gravitate. But we have to figure out what can we do where that 18-year-old, 24-year-old would say, I wouldn't want to live without my AAA card. What kind of services? It's not the ones we're providing now, but there are things that we can build off of our brand of safety, security, peace of mind that they want. And it's up to us to figure out what that is and become relevant for as many people who we feel should use our services.
That makes perfect sense. Flashing in my mind is AARP. And the reason why it's flashing in my mind is, I think it may be one of the largest associations on the planet, certainly in the United States.
Yep.
And it has a mass and a body and a weight. It does lobbying. It develops relationships with other organizations that provide services to retired people. So it's a force that is in the forefront of the needs of retired people, I believe, as I understand it. You've got a potential asset like that, and yet it's a force broken down by parts, and so it can't act quite as a force getting at the forefront of the needs of motorists, because it's just providing in some sense, and maybe I'm understating it, but it's providing a maintenance function and support for as we know it. And I keep flashing on what if it were like AARP and coming together. I'm guessing that's part of your thinking.
It is, for sure. We tend to be a local organization. So within our territory, our assigned area of where we do business, we are very active on legislative issues or advocacy issues. We have a staff of people who that's all they do, is trying to look for ways to help motorists be safe and to enjoy, traveling.
Yeah.
So we were largely responsible for a number of things that you almost take for granted: seatbelt laws, graduated driver licensing, those sorts of things that are really important today. But we do them in our local markets, and eventually, it happens across the country, but it happens a market at a time, as opposed to a single national point of view. So ARP is terrific. They do a lot of great advocacy on behalf of their members, but it's one organization.
Right.
We speak multiple times in multiple locations. So that's precisely it. How do we keep the benefit? Because there's a lot of power in having that local knowledge and that local strength, and being tied into your communities. That's really important. But how do you do that and have the ability to impact the national agenda more powerfully? And that's what, to me, it's all about: keeping the local, but working together more successfully on kind of a more national basis. Which
is a huge challenge, I'm sure. And I want to come back to it. I'm realizing I know you personally as a leader in ways that others don't know, and I want to bring that to the conversation. So it's a little bit of a shift gears. I want people to get to know you a little bit. In some senses, I know you, and I know others know you, and I want to talk about leadership in a direct way. Part of why I wanted to talk with you is having worked with you, having contributed in a relationship between us, and more importantly, whoever I speak to who talks about you as a leader speaks with such respect, and they're seeing and feeling something, just as I have felt and have known for a long time. And I want to say that almost universally, whenever your name comes up in my oh yeah, I know Jim, or he's a buddy, and they speak with such appreciation for you. You've seemed to have generated an enormous amount of trust and respect, and I know you know that. I know you actually don't think about it a whole lot in a direct way. You just kind of are yourself, but I want you to reflect on your life a little bit and tell me a little bit about what does leadership mean to you? What does it mean to be a leader? How do you think about it?
I had a lesson early on. I became a CEO of a relatively large company when I was in my mid to late 30s. And I was,
so 5 years ago, right?
Yeah, right, a few years ago. And I was very impressed with myself. You know? I didn't really know what a CEO was, but I was really thrilled to get that title and that job. And I said, where do you get a load of me? And I thought I was going to come in and I was going to take my 15 years of brilliant experience and just bestow my wisdom on people.
Yeah.
And after 2 days on the job, I realized that the CEO position had absolutely nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
The whole job was making all of them better by helping them be better people, better employees. And it was an epiphany. And so I realized my role has nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with them.
Yeah.
And it's been great. So, my journey is, what can I do to make everybody in the organization better?
Yeah.
And how do I do that in a way that gets everybody in the organization kind of going together in the same direction.
Yeah. So I get that. We met right around that time, and I remember experiencing you as very bright, very talented, and very analytic. You know, like you were able to look at a business from a numbers standpoint or from an operational standpoint, and brilliant at it. And yet, none of those skills speak to the very thing that you just spoke to.
Exactly.
And you had this epiphany and saw, but how come you had the epiphany? Do you have any idea why that? Because a lot of people, they go through life and they end up, you know, they all those analytic skills and all those problem-solving skills become how they drive their leadership and how they shape what they offer, they continue to shape what they offer the world, and they never get what you just described. But something in you got it. How come?
Well, I learned early on that most of the people in the organization were trying to please the CEO. That was what they thought their job was. And I realized that we were all going to be in trouble if they thought their job was to make me happy.
Mm-hmm.
Their job was to do their job as well as they could do it,
mm-hmm.
and make the decisions they needed to make. So I learned that until they didn't worry about making me happy, they didn't worry about what I was thinking about them, that they
mm-hmm.
trusted
mm-hmm.
that my motivations
right.
were shared, that I'm in this with them, not trying to get them.
Right.
Until we came to that common understanding, that we weren't ever going to be successful.
Yeah.
And it's only when they finally have their epiphany, which is, wait a minute, this guy isn't about the title. He's not about the rank.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about that. It's like he's on our team. He wants us to be successful.
Yeah.
And he's here to help us be successful. That's a wonderful time.
Yeah. And I, you know, I remember a little bit of that shift. It was kind of a shift from I'm CEO,
Right.
to it's just me here
Right.
with you.
Right.
You brought a enormous amount of humanity to the role rather quickly, and my sense is that that's what produced some of that trust, some of that glue that allowed you to bring your intelligence, but not in a way that people felt put off by it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think of CEOs in a bad light these days, especially especially with all the absurd stories about cash payouts when people are leaving and all that. The real CEO job is a job of getting an entire organization to think the same way and move in the same direction.
Yeah.
And it is an amazingly gratifying job if you can do that.
Yeah.
So for me, the fun was seeing how people could be better than they were, how people could respond to creating an environment in which they're successful. That's the whole fun of being a CEO.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, to me, I was looking for opportunities to do that more broadly, as opposed to what title and which company is going to sound, the biggest on the resume.
Yeah.
And I've always tried to find an environment that's what they were looking for.
Yeah.
Somebody to come in and do that.
Well, so I get that you figured it out. I get that it's almost like you applied your analytic problem-solving skills to a bigger problem. But again, I see a lot of leaders do that. They figured out, aha, it's about the people, so I'll just be about the people, which is different than naturally being about the people. It's more like they learn the doing of, or the actions of a good leader. Oh, let's see, good leaders create commitment. So if I'm in order to create commitment, I need to have them engaged. In order for them to be engaged, I need to have them participate more. So I will be a participatory leader, but it lacks the heart. It's almost like a well-designed strategy, and others don't get it. They don't feel the heart present. And I'm of a mind, your heart was also present. You didn't just figure it out. You naturally brought some heart.
It has to be real. If somebody's thinking this is all, just today's, flavor of the month, it's never going to work.
Right.
And once my own epiphany happened and I understood it, it was totally real for me. I realized I have to make this work. Mm-hmm. And I enjoyed it, so that's why it was real for me.
Yeah.
And just the thrill of seeing an organization respond and how they, kind of attack things differently under that kind of a scenario. It was great.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense to me. You're still influencing an organization, but it felt gratifying in a deep way for you, and it sounds like that's what really got you hooked.
It is kind of amazing, because I totally agree with you. I was a math major.
Right.
I'm an analytical nerd. I can hang with the best when it comes to, give me a spreadsheet and whatever. Yeah. And I realized that my greatest ability has nothing to do with that. And it's been interesting for me as well. Yeah.
I had the same kind of epiphany for me a long time ago, where I saw, I went to Harvard at a young age, or get a doctorate at a young age at Harvard, and I had plenty of intellectual horsepower. And I realized, not going to do me much good.
Yeah.
It might get me there, but if I really wanted to create conditions where organizations and people can transform, then I've got to bring something much more to the table. And I actually felt somewhat deficient in my heart. I actually felt like I needed to learn and unlearn, and I'm grateful that I did.
It's interesting. I've obviously had an opportunity to mentor, coach many leaders over the years, and the thing that is the hardest is to impart this notion of be yourself, be real, because people will find out very quickly or know instantly if it's real or not.
Yeah.
And so many people have tried to become a type of a leader or read the book and go out and try that. But if it's not who they really are, if they're just, paraphrasing somebody else's words, it fails. So I think everybody has the chance to be who they are.
Yeah.
And they need to put themselves in a position where who they are is what's going to work for them.
Yeah.
And for me, who I am is what's worked for me, and that's a good thing.
Yeah. And well, you don't have to work very hard at that.
Yeah.
It's like Mark Twain's comment about I don't have to, just being honest is the easiest thing, so I don't have to remember anything.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And you know what? It's also the little things. These sound like funny stories, but I became the CEO of this first company, I think, on October 1st. October 31st happened to be Halloween. I showed up on Halloween in probably one of the most outrageous outfits anybody had ever seen, and they couldn't believe that the CEO of the company would behave that way. For me, it was just fun. I enjoyed it.
Right.
That did more good to change the notion of rank and title and whatever, just to make me a person.
Yeah.
And it was a great lesson for me on how important that was to the organization.
Were you, was becoming a CEO an ambition for you?
I would honestly say I've never sat down and say, by the age of X, I'm going to do this. And
Right.
What I've always said is I want to do the best I can and as much as I can. So that seemed to be, the best and as much kind of
the shape of what's possible for you in your life.
Right.
Yeah.
So in my trajectory, that was kind of the job to aspire to.
Yeah.
And I think about that, and this is a little off track, but I grew up in a family of, we couldn't spell CEO. I mean, we didn't know what that was. My dad worked in the same job his entire life, went to the same place every day for 40-something years. And we were extraordinarily happy as a family. It was wonderful. It didn't have much, didn't know any different. So for me to have gotten to where I am is amazing to me, because it wasn't something I said, I don't like this, I have to go do something else. It's always about, I can do better than that, whatever I'm in, so let me go do it. And so it's always been a series of, well, if I don't like that, then do better than that and keep moving. So
that do better energy, that I want to get better and better, that was in you somewhere early on. That may have been you get the smarts, genetic. You get whatever you get, your ability to hit the golf ball, which is a different story, but that's not what propels us necessarily. It may be useful, But there was a drive in there to get better and better. Any sense of where that drive came from?
No question. I was always the smallest. You know, if you were picking teams, I was probably going to be the last pick because, you know, there was everybody and then there was me.
Yeah.
And in my mind, I was better than anybody at anything. You know, it's kind of how I process things. So it's a little bit of the chip on the shoulder. So, you know, you guys are going to go to this school. I'll go to a better school.
I'll prove to you.
Yeah. So
and to myself. Yeah.
And just watch it. So, and then early on, you kind of get this. You know, there's nothing you can't do if you don't believe in it. If you put your mind to it and go do it, you can do it. So I have an enormous amount of confidence.
Yes.
My mom brought my fiance aside before the wedding and said, "Let me just warn you about what's going to happen." This gentleman has never been wrong in his entire life and never will be. He's a very confident person. So just so you know that. So I mean, I remember those kind of things.
Yeah. But something shifted for you where you now are wrong sometimes, and I know that. But the belief in self and the I'm going to be right no matter what it sounds like it's a very useful drive to propel you toward. And yet, if you kept at that I'm never wrong, you would not be the leader you are now. In some sense, something shifted for you somewhere.
What shifted was there's not a lot of use in me proving how right I am. What the use is in building something and growing something and making something better. So the energy kind of transferred to the organizational energy from the personal energy.
Right, right. And then dropping being personally right starts to not matter in that equation.
And just to finish the other story, since being married, I haven't been right yet.
I know. I understand. I understand well, but it's okay.
It's okay.
She probably said to your mom, yeah,
wait.
Yeah, okay, I get it. Sure, fine.
Thanks for the warning, but it's taken care of.
No, not a problem.
Yeah, it's certainly fixed.
That's great. Were there any, in addition to that epiphany, were there any other moments that were kind of defining moments for you as you kind of figured out what leadership is all about?
I think the power of communicating was another moment. The ability to influence by your words, your look, your tone, your disposition, whatever. It surprised me that how you say what you say and how you come off can be as powerful as it obviously is. And if you can use that productively and for the good of the organization, how incredibly important that is. To me, the best leaders have a natural ability to communicate with whatever audience they're communicating, whether it's nuclear physicists or all the people who work in the print shop, but being natural and being able to communicate. An epiphany for me was that I don't care if I'm with the nuclear physicist or the people in the print shop. I enjoy it. I am natural with them. They respond to that, and it's real, and it's very powerful. And if somebody were to say, what makes you successful, I would say my ability to connect with people, whomever, for whatever reason, at any time, is a critical component.
Has it always been there?
I had no idea. Like I told you, I was this math geek who was more comfortable sitting in a room, cranking out stuff. But I guess I care, and people know it. Yeah. And so there's a connection pretty soon, and that's what makes it possible.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting how there you can take these classes to learn how to be a good speaker, and I sometimes think undo them all. That's not how you become a great influencer. You might actually be a clever, intelligent speaker, but a great influencer has something to do with being just very real.
Right.
And you figured that out a long time ago, and then it was actually easy, it sounds like.
And it's fun. I mean, what more fun is it to be engaged in a conversation with a person or many people, and there's a connection?
Yeah.
And what's worse than being in a conversation when the other side's looking at their watch or could care less?
Right.
It is where I get my energy.
Yeah, I got it.
There's no question that my energy comes from that connection with other people.
I figured that out a while ago. I used to, when I gave talks, I'd have an ample script, and I would be reading from it or using it as my notes to guide me, and I felt stiff.
Mm-hmm. No
and it might have been intelligently designed, but the audience would be, oh, that is good, very interesting, Keith.
Yes.
And somewhere a while ago, I stopped bringing my script, and when I give talks on leadership or whatever, I throw away the script completely, and I just sit down and I feel what wants to be spoken, and I connect, and we're off to the races, and it's 10 times more powerful experience.
No question. No question.
And terrifying in some level, to not have the script.
Well, they call me the wingman here, and it has nothing to do with who I hang out with at night,
Right.
It is...
You're winging it.
I'm winging it because it's got to be real. It's got to be natural.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you don't prepare, that you're not thinking about what it is that you need to talk about.
Yes.
But it has to be in the moment. And if somebody wants to go that way, you got to be able to go that way, or else they're going to get what you gave them, which was reading some document that they could have sent in an email.
Yes. Yes.
So, and making that connection, that's the most powerful thing you can do.
Yeah.
Because you then have either an ambassador or a teammate or somebody who's out going to do that and do it with another group of people. So that's where the power comes from.
It's interesting. I think you and I are similar in many ways, but I want to speak to what I notice in you. I have not only had that feeling of connection with you, and it feels genuine, but I've observed you in other situations over the years here and there, and others have that same experience. They have the experience of you're just being their friend. You're just, here's me, being me, with you, genuinely. And I have a belief that that's a huge part of why they trust you. It's as if you have, 6,000 friends at AAA or 10,000 or 50 or whatever, however many that are there.
It's interesting, and I've thought about this. It's not important, and I don't worry about whether they like me or that they're my friend.
Right.
What I care about is that we're effectively engaging.
Yes.
And that we get it. And that I get what they have to say, and I understand, and I'm empathetic, and they get what I'm trying to say. Yeah. A lot of people mistake that for, do they like you or not? I've made some very hard decisions that I have delivered very empathetically that people didn't like. It's not about like. It's about effectiveness and, exchanging information, and messaging, and sharing. Communicating.
Well, I wasn't saying friend in quite you want everybody to be your friend. It was more, what better friend to have than somebody that's going to be real. So it's more of the spirit of no matter where you go, I'm going to treat you as a human being, and I'm going to be real with you and invite you to the same. And so you may not make a friend in the sense of the traditional sense of the word, but it feels different. It feels like...
Yeah, it's trust-based.
Yeah.
I think that notion, if somebody said, what would be the most important thing for you, I would say that people trusted me, and they believed that my motivations were appropriate. And trust is a powerful thing to have, and it's an easy thing to lose.
I'm wondering if there's any moments in your life, leadership moments where you're most proud of, where you would say, wow, I just felt good about this. It felt right, it felt clean, or were any particular that stand out for you that?
Not one in particular, but the type in particular. And it's any opportunity I've had to engage with large groups of employees informally. Brown bags. No subject, just sitting down and saying, what do we want to talk about? The power of that for me is just remarkable because it goes where it needs to go, and I walk out of those things going, why am I ever sitting behind my desk for 1 minute? Why would I ever do that if I could continue to have these kind of moments with people? Because the power and the learning and the motivation of those kind of discussions is unbelievable. But what happens is the reality of the job, the bureaucracy, the board meetings and the whatever meetings, it kind of, you feel like, oh, I have to go do that. And I've always tried to figure out how in the world could I structure a job where all I did was just kind of have informal discussions. It's an amazing thing of what you learn, which is usually different than what you thought. And it's a great way to connect with people.
Wow.
So and there's been many of those. It was my favorite thing here in this organization because my predecessor was the polar opposite. Very formal. I mean, a person that people respected and generally cared for, but scripted and not comfortable ever in a discussion that he didn't know all the answers to or what the questions were going to be. So in the very first interaction, there was meet the new CEO, and there were people bursting at the seams. We filled the room up.
Wow.
And they were expecting more of the same. And I stood up and said, hi, what do you guys want to talk about? And they kind of looked for like, well, I don't know. And then it got going. And then that meeting was amazing.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It does break the frame or break the expectation that they have of the exalted big CEO.
Exactly.
And it's you saying, here's me, not so exalted, not so big, just here to be with you, offer what I can offer, and let's see where this goes. And I can imagine it would have been quite a shock, and a welcome shock.
Yeah, it was fun.
So I want to bring us back to this challenge. I'm fascinated by what you're trying to do with the clubs, and the bringing them together under one umbrella of sorts, although keeping the separateness. I'm wondering what you're learning as you face this. It's now been 2 or 3 years since you've been kind of on that journey. What are you noticing and what are you learning about yourself and about the process and about what this is going to take?
It's harder than doing it within an organization to get the hearts and minds of one group of people because in our case we have 6 individual AAA clubs in one umbrella organization, one holding company. And they all have different cultures and they all have different things that are most important in their world. And what's been most difficult is finding that common ground where we all say, yes, that's the thing that we should all do. We're getting there, and slowly but surely we're boiling it down to what's really critical. But it's hard.
I would imagine.
When you control one organization, you can say, this is what's important and go do it.
Yeah.
Now we're trying to find something that we can all rally around.
Yeah.
And it has to be more than, the income statement.
Right.
It has to be what you get passionate about and what you really care about.
Or more than what we have in common.
Yeah.
Because there's plenty we have in common.
Right.
But sitting around saying, hey, it's tough for me over here, isn't it tough for you over there? And, here's what we did when we faced that moment. What are you going to... That's a nice thing to do, but it's not a powerful enough reason for coming together and joining forces in some way.
Right. So I think that's exactly right. That's why this innovation concept that we were talking about is really important, because it is, in my mind, what's going to bring us all together to share in that effort to bring innovation to the table for our respective clubs.
And I would imagine innovation as a concept isn't enough. There needs to be some meaningful, and you need to find what are the 2, 3, 5, or 6 or whatever things that are crucial for our success going forward, and coming together we're more able to propel ourselves toward that innovation by joining forces in some way. It's got to be a particular set of something, not just the concept of innovation.
Absolutely. I used to think innovation was kind of the old model. GE and others, they would literally get a building someplace away from wherever most of their employees were, and they'd hire all these brainiacs, go put them in their think tank and kind of leave them alone and hope that every once in a while something would pop out that would be useful.
Right. No.
That's not the model. The
Not
model
in this
is
case.
how do you engage all the individuals in all of our organizations to be of the mindset that they should be thinking all the time, what more, what better,
Yeah.
such that all of the innovation has to come from within the organization if we're really going to become an innovative organization. We can put a handful of people off to the side and they may come up with something, but we'll never be an innovative organization if that's the model.
Right.
We have to make that kind of who we are.
Right.
And when you're a 100-year-old company that has kind of lost its way in that respect, it's a bit of a challenge because you've built your culture around the operation and, you know, the daily grind kind of things that are kind of outside of innovation.
Yeah, I would imagine. And you built it incrementally.
Right.
You know, so many little innovations, I would imagine, would occur. Let's see how we can do this a little better, but to have a breakthrough, to
That's
truly
exactly right.
create something that doesn't exist, which is the initial innovation of AAA, that's an order of magnitude well
That's
beyond.
exactly right. In fact, those are our words. We have to get out of the incremental and get into the breakthrough. Those
Yeah.
are the exact two words.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I'm aware of, when I look at leaders, the way usually organizations form and start to thrive is somebody says, I have an idea, or I have an image, I have a vision, I have something that I believe is going to be helpful, and I feel strongly about it, I feel excited about it, and I'm able to articulate it in a way that's compelling. And so others kind of form around that person to say, yeah, that's a good vision, I like that, I'll join you and I'll help you make it happen. That's often how organizations form. And then within an organization like CSAA or any organization, that leader now has an organizational structure and a system that imbues in that organization a certain amount of power and authority to revision.
Right.
So the organization kind of will say, okay, that was a good vision, that worked, you got another one?
Right.
And if you do, we'll follow that because the first one worked really well. So even the process of revisioning in such an an organization is possible and often easy. You've got a very different challenge. You personally don't have the power to
Right.
say, follow me, folks,
Right.
I got the new vision.
Right.
In fact, nobody in the circle is imbued with that power. Nobody's giving it to
Exactly.
the other. You've got a bunch of
In fact,
leaders.
It's done on purpose that way.
Yeah.
That's how we came together. That's how we agreed to come together. So you're exactly right. It's a whole different game when you're encouraging collaboration versus, within your own organization moving in one direction.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
it's a challenge.
So as you face that challenge, and I'm sure you've thought about it and felt it, and what are your thoughts about what is it going to take from you, and what is it going to take from the others to rise to that challenge?
There are a couple of key constituencies. One, each of these organizations has a board. That board has the accountability for the organization's success.
Mm-hmm.
They also have management leaders. What I have to do is I have to effectively create a vision of what could be for both of those groups. And get them to get excited about something that's different than the current reality.
Mm-hmm.
The current reality isn't bad. It's been okay for a long time, but it's under attack, and we shouldn't assume that 10 years from now we'll be in the same place we are.
It's a dangerous assumption.
It's a very dangerous assumption. Yes. So what I do is the same thing we were talking about, only I have different constituencies now.
Mm-hmm.
I have 6 boards of directors who I have to be the person who creates in them this sense of what could be,
Mm-hmm.
which is different than the current reality. And even more than that, why they should want to go there.
Right.
And why that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really hard because this is a group who kind of likes it the way it is.
Sure.
And
understandable. I mean,
absolutely.
To me, it feels like the natural forces of life, no matter where we are in life, no matter where I am. If I've been reasonably successful, there's a comfort
right.
in it. I know this terrain. I've done it well, I'm successful in it, people value what I bring within this world. So there's a lot of forces to keep it right where it is. And who can blame them? Who can blame me or anybody for the comfort of the knowing what it is as it is?
And then at the level below the board is the executives in all these clubs. And the goal, the challenge is to change the way we measure success. Because it's been measured for so long the same way. Mm-hmm. How many members do you have? Mm-hmm. You know, how much equity per member do you have? Mm-hmm. As opposed to a whole notion of value looked at differently, or
yes.
How do we bring things together differently to create value? So, you know, their own personal scorecards are what they hold on to really tightly, and it's really difficult to get them to consider something else that's outside of what they were, you know, kind of gearing towards their whole life.
Yes, yes.
So it's all about, it's still about, if they trust me, that it's not about me, it's not about where I want to go, it's about what's possible, and build some excitement about that, then you can do it. And we're getting there. Yeah. It's just slower.
I can imagine. It reminds me of, in some sense, what we face in this country and on the planet. And just I don't want to get too global and too big, but as you know, I'm interested in some of these questions. What is it going to take to produce a breakthrough in the planet when the leaders of our countries and the leaders of our institutions are fairly comfortable in knowing how to do it under the current conditions? And so there's this natural wanting to ignore the reality around us, just like in AAA, you're going to, well, these competitors out there, yeah, they don't know what they're doing. They're going to, we've had competitors come and go. They're going to fly away. So there's this, the mind wants to treat the information that's emerging around us as not truly a threat, and I think it's happening at a global level. Global warming, you know, I don't know what your position on it is, but my point of view is it's happening. My point of view is that the pollution that's been building up over decades now is having an effect on the environment. And my heart aches when I continue to see the wars that are happening. So my point of view is there's evidence that our world is not as healthy as it needs to be. I notice that the models or the definitions of success that currently exist and the measures that currently exist, like gross national product, it's interesting that if we treat gross national product as the defining measure of success, then we will ignore other factors that are happening that need to be taken into account. And there's, I don't know which country it is, Denmark or something, I can't remember what, they're starting to ask the question, are there other measures of growth? Right. And one of them, maybe it's Iceland, I can't remember, is thinking about gross emotional product. Like the emotional well-being of people. Right. Can we measure that and include that in our thinking about what defines success? And I got to believe that the inclusion of other measures allows for something to emerge, allows us to question the current condition. But if we keep holding on to the same measures in the same way, then these evidence out there that things may not be right become ignored.
It's kind of the cause and effect thing. In our world, you know, the bottom line of profits and, you know, revenue at the top line is what's measured, but those are an effect of a whole bunch of other things.
Yes.
It's an effect of how productive your people, how engaged are they? It's an effect of you know, how are your customers perceiving your brand?
Yes,
you know, all of that kind of stuff. So to me, the two measures that are most important are employee engagement. How engaged are they in the mission of what we're up to?
Right, right.
And there's a lot of different jargon around it, but do our members promote who we are to others? You know, if we asked our member, would you recommend this company, that 100% of the time they would say yes. Yeah. If we succeed on both of those things, these other things will happen.
Yes.
And it's the same point, you know, whether it's net emotional product or whatever, but if you have everybody in the country feeling that we're all going in the same direction and that we have kind of something in common that we're trying to achieve, it's no different. We can do amazing things.
Yes.
It happens when there's a war. It's kind of sad that that's what it takes to get a country to kind of unite. We're not united around the current situation,
No, clearly not.
But look what happens in World War II. When we were united around
Right.
something, the country can do amazing things. And
Yeah.
I don't want to go off on that tangent, but it's a shame that we can't unite around a few things and move everybody forward.
It would require us, individually and collectively, to rethink what are we reuniting around. And I don't have the answer. I don't know if it's gross emotional product or it's the measurement of pollution or whatever, but I do hold the point of view that whatever condition we're in is created by a set of assumptions and beliefs, and the measures we use are reflections of those beliefs. And so if we want to create different conditions around us, something's got to shift in terms of what we pay attention to and what we measure. And if we could get leaders thinking about that, something else might burst through. And I get that you're doing the same thing with the AAA clubs, is asking questions of the measures that we're using. They're reflections of thinking that make sense over time. At a time, do they continue to make sense? And what might we think more expansively?
Right. So you can measure profit in that, and you can use that to pay bonuses or something else. But if you're going to measure the real success of the organization, it has to be around the health of the organization and its employees and the perception of its customers, its members in our case, as to the value of the relationship.
Yeah. And then shareholder value or membership growth or financial profitability or whatever is a lagging indicator, not a leading indicator. And it sounds like you're thinking about what are the leading indicators that naturally produce that lagging effect.
You can't ignore that. You can't lose money for 10 years to keep your customers
Right.
happy. That's
No, of
been
course
tried
not.
before. It doesn't work.
Right.
In fact, I think of things in a triangle, and we probably talked about this. The triangle has the employee, the customer, and the shareholder, if you
Right.
would. In our case, we don't have shareholders, but we'll call it the board or the financial side. And when any one of those gets out of whack, if you're paying too much attention to one and not enough attention to the other, it's a recipe for failure. Enron is classic. They paid attention to only one of those three. It wasn't about employees. It wasn't about customer. It was all about maximizing profit for a few people to make a lot of money.
Yeah.
And we know what happened there. There are some companies who pay less attention to that and too much on one of the others, and that's not necessarily
sustainable.
good either. So it's that balance between making sure you have healthy employees, healthy customers, and a healthy balance sheet and an income statement.
Right.
Then you can do amazing things.
Right.
But get out of whack with any one of them, and it's going to show up fast in a bad way.
So I'm wondering, as you think about your life and the arc of your life, and I mean, we're both at an age where we start to think about those things.
Once you get in your 30s, you start contemplating that, right?
Yeah, well, thankfully I'm only 32, so. I was watching Jack Benny, a show about Jack Benny. The joke is always 39.
He's 39 for 40 years.
Yeah. So, as you think about what you leave behind, and I know you're not done. I know you've got, some more play in you, and an opportunity to continue to contribute. So I'm not implying that, but I would imagine you think a little bit about what impact you have or have had. And I'm wondering what are your thoughts about it? What impact have you had? And maybe when you draw an end to your career, what would you like people to say, or what would you like to say is the impact that you had?
Well, I'll be honest, I don't think about that very often.
We should.
But I should probably. The second question is easier. What would I like people to think? I would like people to say that I trusted him. He was fair. And I'm glad that he was there. It's not about liking as much as this person cared, and I really trusted that individual. As far as legacy, I think it's been about showing a different leadership model, and how you can lead in a way that it's not all about jumping up and down on tables and being the person who exerts their power based on their position, but leading through how you communicate, how you interact, and how you behave with each other. So, I think the first thing I did here was create a set of behaviors that we hold everybody to.
Yeah.
And it's not for them versus for us or whatever. And I would hope that everybody said this is a person who believed in what he was doing and lived that way every day.
We only have a few more minutes, so I just want to give just open space. Is there anything else that you would want to tell me about your life or tell others around the area of leadership? And there may be nothing, but just, what question would you wished I had asked?
Well, you know what? The other thing we haven't talked about, and it's another lesson, I guess, is I learned a long time ago not to take myself too seriously.
Yeah.
And what I'm doing isn't that important in the grand scheme of things. And if I was to get hit by the turnip truck tomorrow, I don't worry that the world's going to end and all of that kind of stuff. So I'm very balanced. My wife calls me a robot. She doesn't understand how I'm not suffering from incredible depression and incredible euphoria. And I just don't take either myself or what I do seriously. That doesn't mean it's not important. It doesn't mean I don't work at it really hard. I work as hard as anybody I know.
Yeah.
It's just that it's not life or death. It's not as important as my family. It's not as important as my health. It's just kind of what I do. And that has really helped. I've had a rule that if I'm in town, I eat with the family at night. It doesn't matter what's going on at work. It doesn't matter anything. That's the most important thing I can do. And I think our family has had more dinners together than any CEO's family that I know. And that grounds me into the reality of what, don't get too full of yourself. And that comes across, and you know what, that helps. It helps me be more successful.
It's to me, it's just about not having much ego invested in the whole thing, including the success and the accolades or whatever it is that you get. I've never experienced you as getting puffed up about yourself, and that's partly why I enjoy being with you. And I'm hearing you say the same thing. It matters, but in the grand scheme of things, I'm just one person doing the best I can. And I'm reminded of Rudyard Kipling's poem "If." And there's a line in the poem. It's in the front of Wimbledon.
If you can keep your head when all about you are losing theirs and all of that.
It's that, but the particular line is, if you can treat triumph and disaster, if you can face triumph and disaster and treat them both for the imposters that they are. Don't get too up.
Yeah.
It's not about you. When you get big, it was the people around you had helped you succeed. It's not you.
Right.
And when you get down in a disaster, it's not about you.
Right. Right.
Then we will grow up and be able to be real.
I appreciate you saying that I don't have an ego. We all have egos. But
Well, I don't mean that you don't, but it doesn't strike me as
not-
being the forefront of who
it's
you are.
not why I exist. It's not what drives me.
Yeah.
And I think it also helps me cope with a pretty hard job. I mean, I do take it very seriously, and I do care such that I want to be successful for all of us.
Yeah.
And if you start thinking about what's in it for you, or how's this going to look for you, and what are people thinking about you, I don't think I could handle it. It would be too hard. It's better to think about it without me being the key issue.
Yeah. Well, I'm just grateful. I mean, I've been grateful for our friendship.
Me too.
I've been grateful for the conversations we've had and on the golf course, and just the time we get together, and just for you to share with me and with others who you are. I'm just So I feel so blessed. Thank you.
I've enjoyed it. Thanks,
Yeah.
Keith.